It is Wednesday night. It is 8:02 on the East Coast. It is time for the Sit Down with LB. Hello, everyone. It's me, LB, and I'm back. Finally, I know it's been a while, but I am happy to be back on the Sit Down with LB. Happy New Year, because I haven't been online with this show since the new year started, and so I'm happy to be here today on this Wednesday night. Welcome to the beginning of a new 6-part series called Inside the Industry, and I am happy to present this. You know, the idea came to me when I was thinking about all of the important roles that are so crucial to our career. A lot of people think that we're just opera singers who do what we do. That's not true. There are so many important people that have a bigger role sometimes than we do just getting on the stage. A lot of things have to happen. A lot of the hefty lifting has to happen before we can actually have shows. And so the people that I have today, we have general directors. They are so absolutely necessary and important to make sure that all that the public sees is taken care of before we actually get into the city, before we sign the contracts, before we do all the many things we do. And so in this 6-part series, we're going to talk to general directors. We're going to talk to casting directors. We're going to talk to agents. We're going to talk to critics. That one's going to be fun. We're going to talk to people leading preparatory divisions and young artist programs. And we're going to talk to people about social media and PR. So we have in store for you a wonderful series. And I thank you already, Jim Lieberthal, Ann Ehrenstein, Happy Day, Katisha Goodson, all of you for tuning in to this session, the beginning of this series called Inside the Industry, focusing today on general directors. So I'm not going to talk too much about the show and the platform. I'm actually going to invite my two distinguished guests, two people that I consider colleagues, but people that I also consider friends of mine. Francesca Zambello and Devan are joining me tonight on the Sit Down with LB. Welcome, both of you.
Great to be here.
So let me ask you this first. Where are you both calling in from, if I may ask that question?
I'm in the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. right now, across the street from the Kennedy Center. But
Okay.
mostly since COVID started, I have been in Cooperstown, New York, where Glimmerglass is located.
And David?
I'm in Philadelphia in our loft, about a 20-minute walk from the Opera House.
That's awesome. Well, before we get going, hello, Michelle from Seattle and all of you. I want to read very quickly. I'm sure everyone knows how distinguished my guests are, but please let me read their bios very quickly. Francesca Zambello, I'll start with you. Francesca is an internationally recognized director of opera and theater, as well as general director of the Glimmerglass Festival since 2010 and artistic director of Washington National Opera at the Kennedy Center since 2012. Both organizations have thrived artistically and financially while increasing their national and international profiles as a result of her vision and leadership. She has also served as the artistic advisor to the San Francisco Opera from 2005 to 2011 and as the artistic director of the Skylight Theater from 1987 to 1992. Her United States directing debut took place at the Houston Grand Opera with the production of Fidelio. She debuted in Europe at Teatro La Fenice in Venice with Beatrice di Tenda and has since staged new productions at major theaters, opera houses, and festivals in Europe, Asia, Australia, Russia, and the good old US of A. She has worked at over 50 international opera houses. Wow, are there that many? Including the Metropolitan Opera, La Scala, Lyric Opera of Chicago, Paris Opera, Bolshoi, Munich State Opera, Covent Garden, Opera Australia, blah, 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 on and on and on. She has been named a Chevalier des Arts et des Lettres by the French government, a Knight with the Order of the Star of Italy, and received the Russian Federation Arts Medal. All of her service to culture. This covers that. Other honors include 3 Olivier Awards from the London Society of Theatres and 2 Evening Standard Awards, and she has twice received the French Grand Prix de Critique for her work at the Paris Opera. She also received the Medallion Society Award from San Francisco Opera, recognizing 30 years of directing for the company. She is an American who grew up in Europe. Miss Zambello speaks French, Italian, German, and Russian. She attended Moscow University and received a BA and honorary doctorate from Colgate University. She has served as an adjunct professor at Yale University. Francesca lives in New York City and Cooperstown, New York, with her wife, Faith Gay, a founding partner at Celindy and Gay, and her son, Jackson, who I've met and is a lot of fun. So that is the esteemed, magnificent Francesca Zambello. So thank you, Francesca, for being here.
Oh my God.
Look at that resume.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
We could have edited. We could have cut that out.
David Devan joined Opera Philadelphia in January of 2006 and was appointed general director of the company in 2011. Since his arrival, David has worked closely with board and administration on strategic planning, initiatives, and building partnerships within the community and the opera world. David guided the company through a transformative period of innovation that led Opera News to describe it as one of the leading instigators of new work in the country, and let me add, in the world, and the New York Times to describe Opera Philadelphia as a hotbed of operatic innovation. Under his leadership and artistic vision, Opera Philadelphia has grown to become a company of international stature and a favorite co-producing partner with companies all over the globe, developing fresh productions of classic works as well as premieres written by today's leading composers. The company has engaged and energized both established and emerging artists, providing opportunities for important role debuts for singers like none other, myself, Lawrence Brownlee, Eric Owens, my friend Nathan Gunn, Stephanie Blythe, Christine Gerke, Lisette Oropeza, and so many more. The Daily Beast recently commented, Opera Philadelphia has been one of the forefront of commissioning new operas with contemporary subject matter and an innovative genre blending sensibility to snare a younger audience and revitalize opera for the 21st century. So David's doing a ton of stuff. Under David's leadership, Opera Philadelphia has commissioned or co-commissioned 8 new operas, including Yardbird, which I was fortunate to star in, by Daniel Schneider and Bridget Wimberly, and has since been at the Apollo Theater and the Hackney in London. Cold Mountain, based on the best-selling novel Charles Frege. David Devan is doing tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff. He is an immediate and past chair of the board of directors of the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance and a member of the Opera America Board. David is privileged to serve in the city with rich and diverse cultural roots. He continues to work tirelessly to make opera as an important part of our community. And David is married to the wonderful David. So they're the double D's. So these are my distinguished guests. Of course, everyone, excuse me, David, your resume is so beautiful, so long, I had to kind of like pare it down. I mean, I could talk about your resumes for hours and hours and hours, but thank you both for being here. Let's jump right into it if we can. So you're general directors of very important leading artistic institutions in the world of opera. As in the role of general director, how do you view your role as the general director, and what do you want to achieve in your position? Let's start with you, Francesca.
Whoa, that's a big question. Well, I'm going to, as a general director, I'm going to focus perhaps more on Glimmerglass, where I serve really to run the company. In Washington, I'm very fortunate to be the artistic director with Tim O'Leary, who is the general director here, and an amazing colleague. So it's a very different structure. And I think in Glimmerglass, my focus is really very much on the community and who is our community and how do we respond to that community. And that means local, regional, national, international. So everything that we do is very different because I think we're in a rural setting, and your setting, I know before we were talking about where you are, you really have to respond to the place that you are and build from that, which means, of course, we have audiences that come from all over, but I still have to really focus on how to respond to where I am. And that means in terms of programming and fundraising. So that is sort of one key element. And then another big part of our company is education. We have normally a very robust young artist program, usually 50 young artists and 50 interns every summer. As a festival, it's a very different structure, and I'm sure David will talk about this, than running a year-round company. A festival versus a year-round company are two completely different mechanisms. Obviously, board and all that is similar, but a festival is all about working all year and then blasting off for, in our case, normally 8 weeks. So that's a short answer, but I think we're probably going to get into a lot more topics.
David?
Yeah, well, Jessica, I think 4 years ago we launched our festival to start off our season. So we try to do two things at once, starting with a 12-day festival. So following your lead. I think the role of general director, we're arts institutions, but we're also 501c3s. And so we're responsible for a community asset. And so it's really to guide and in service of the mission. And that might seem lofty, but it has real consequences. So I think the principal part of my job is to make sure we are working with the community, as Jessica said, and artists, for artists to be their best selves, to make sure you're running an artist-centered operation that allows them to do their best and most exciting work, and for everybody else in the institution to lift them up, that we really are better than the sum of the parts. And so as the leader of this institution, in our case, there are 275 to 300 artists a year that make their living at Opera Philadelphia, and another 100 people involved in other ways. So that's 400 people. And to lift those 400 people up to be the best version of them and support them to be the best versions of themselves, which is a tireless job.
Yes. You get little sleep, right?
Yeah, but you talked in our bios about all the things we accomplished, and I know Jessica would probably agree with me. We didn't accomplish those things. There's a team and an army and a community that achieved those things. And so really, that is for me, it's just the principal part of the job. And it's sort of like, it's a weird leadership dance, because it's not my way or the highway. You have to institute and instigate inquiry and dialogue and invite conversation and morph that together. And I think with the pandemic, we're finding those skills ever more needed.
Well, both of you have been in your positions. I think you said you started as general director in Glimmerglass in 2010. Is that correct? By
Yes.
your bio.
Yeah.
So you've been in these, and David, you've been since 2011. So more or less about the same time as general directors. Mm-hmm. In these 10 years or so, how do you think your roles have changed, or have they changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like David said, it's not so much even me, it's about how everyone in our company has changed. I mean, I think of Glimmerglass is really an ensemble, like the way we have an ensemble of performers. It's an ensemble company, like the head of development and marketing and PR and facilities. That we're like a team. And I think over the decade I've been here, we've just gotten much closer. And it's a different management style maybe than in a bigger company, because everyone is working together. And I do think that the company has philosophically moved much more over the last 7 years, a firm commitment to dealing with social action and social change in everything from like operas for children, bringing opera to Attica prison, doing works that may speak to important social issues, many kinds of issues. And I think that we in a way have gone back to some of the roots of opera and theater by really focusing ourselves on picking, projects and things that go around it, so that people come not only for the sort of total experience of the ethos, but really also to be challenged or find something in themselves to think about. And again, I think sometimes that's easier in a festival because people, it's not like they came from work all day. And I think that for me, that is I've seen the big change in our company in that direction.
David?
Yeah, I think 10 years ago, when I became the general director, you pretty much had a map of what y'all needed to do, and you applied yourself to do that. And then, sort of, let's say 7 years ago, it started to become clear that the map was a little soggy. And the lines were getting a little blurred. And I think we started to see a lot of tensions in the field. We started seeing a lot of growth of new work, which was great. And not only at Opera Philadelphia, but I know Cheska's had been instigated a lot of new work as well as my other colleagues. There was a tension in the subscription model. There was a tension in philanthropy. But it all sort of seemed to go plunking along, and we were all trying to make our way. And as a general director, we were kind of like shadow dancing or boxing, sort of bobbing and weaving our way. And then the pandemic came, and all the crap, all the truth got laid bare. And there's no rule book. And the rule book we were following wasn't the right rule book anyways. And now we're at a point where general directors, I believe, have a choice of we can go wait for things to come back, or we can lead a dialogue in our companies and our communities about what we're going to look like post-pandemic, in an acknowledgement that that world will be different. And so what has happened to the job in 10 years is generational, and it will be generational change, I believe, in this next chapter that we're all charged to create, because there's no playbook.
I totally agree, David. I mean, it's so interesting, like 10 years ago and starting, I'm sure it was the same for you. There were certain things that were like, for sure, like you knew your subscription model. You knew, okay, we're going to program these amount of works. The budget, the board approved the budget. Okay, we're moving forward. We're always scrapping by. We all are. It's all like, hanging on by your teeth. But it was pretty clear. It was like the days of many of our predecessors, and I am definitely older than David, but the same number of years in this kind of job, coming from a different angle. Things like, Danny Newman and the subscription model. Those things are like dead. And they were already like, we were already going, I don't know about this anymore. But it was a decade ago, there were certain things that we really knew, like, okay, we're going to cast like this. We're going to do this piece. This is the tent pole that's going to go here.
Yep.
Tent pole is the term we use for like, the ABC, Aida Bohem Carmen. And it was like, it was already, the fiber was crinkling and cracking. And then obviously, with the pandemic, it is now, okay, now you have to reinvent, harvest what was good and reinvent and figure out how to reinvent and recreate and build a new model. And I think most people are on that page.
Well, go ahead. You wanted to say something, David?
Yeah, no, I agree that I think a lot of people are on the stage. And I think one thing that's happened, Cheska, you and I are on this call every 2 weeks with a bunch of our colleagues. And I think there's, just to be frank, I think there's just a general feeling of a more openness and a less territorial vibe in the field, because we're all feeling our way and we're sharing information. I mean, we were just talking in prep to the call about how we shared some information, Cheska and I, on an important document that we needed to deal with. So I do, but I don't think there's any map on what the answers are, and what happens in Cooperstown will be different than happens in Philadelphia. It could be tethered. There could be things that we do together, but the major response will probably be different because our circumstances and our communities are different. One other thing I want to put on, because you mentioned Danny Newman, I've been thinking about this a lot. So here's the thing that was an unintended consequence of the last, let's say, 50 years, 60 years of performing arts. The subscription model and everything that supported it, and the development pyramid, and anybody in arts administration knows what I'm talking about, bring people in and then you grow them up. It sort of perfected the art of exclusion. Subscription was about selling a whackload of tickets to a small number of people, relatively speaking. And I think, now that subscription was waning and now things are blowing open, it charges us to think about different ways of thinking about participation. So for example, at Opera Philadelphia, we sell less tickets than we did 10 years ago, but we have more customers. We serve more people, and they're more diverse people. What's the job? What's the 501c3 job? Is it to sell a lot of tickets to 6,000 people, or is it to have a broad cross-section of the community participate in the work? These are all just fundamental questions. But the Danny Newman thing, I was literally thinking about this weekend.
Would somebody clarify what the Danny Newman thing for my listeners who perhaps are not exactly sure?
He was.
That's general director speak.
Okay, when I was very, very young, one of my first jobs as an assistant director was working at the Lyric Opera of Chicago. Artis Koenig was the general director. And one of the great few, may I say, underlining female general directors that this country has ever seen. And she, the person who was head of marketing and PR was a man named Danny Newman. And at that point, the Lyric had a subscription rate of a ticket sale rate of 101%, which is, that means that every seat is sold plus the tickets that are returned are sold again. And this was Artis's real triumph all during the 80s and I think into the early 90s, maybe, David, correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, Danny invented the notion of, what makes a subscription package, how you market it, how you sell it, the ratio of what percentage of discount you should give. And this was like a handbook for arts administration, for theater, opera, ballet, for like probably the 70s, 80s. And I mean, and he was an extremely gregarious character. And he really helped sort of create that model of how to convince people to subscribe and be in the club for whatever, at that point, the Lyric was doing, I think, 11 or 12 operas a season. And so that was what it was. And I think, I knew him personally and of course read his book, and I'm sure David read his book at some point.
Yeah, it's required reading. It's called Subscribe Now. You can Google it.
It's interesting. It's interesting. Go ahead, please, David. Please, after you.
No,
please.
Go.
No, it's interesting because Janet Jeriel, who's a good friend of mine, I've known for a long time, she said that this model was used into the 90s, well into the 90s. So it was the standard. And here's a question I have for you. So since you knew you had this Danny Newman model, you had the structure of opera companies, and this is the way things are done, did you think, okay, I want to be an opera general director because of this? It's an easy job. I think I'm built for it. What was the thing that drove you to say, I want to be a general director? What was that thing? David, let's start with you.
Sure. So I started my career in 1989 at the Canadian Opera Company. I was hired by Brian Dickey, to be the marketing strategy guy. I had a business degree and a minor in math. So I was the analytical guy, and I'd never seen an opera.
Okay.
And I went to an opera, fell in love with it, went to Brian, and said, okay, I'll keep doing the job. I'll work my 70 hours a week. Can I be seconded to every department in the opera company? And he said yes. And for 5 years, I worked, while I was running the marketing program at the COC, I worked in every department. And at the end of that, we had a little sit down. And I said, someday I want to add to this art form. I want to this. And I then became a general director because Brian got in a plane and flew to Philadelphia before 2011 while I was managing director here, took me out to lunch and said, it's time, go and do it. And so I did. And I talked to the company, and here I am.
Wow. Jessica.
Wow. Well, my path wasn't, I mean, I was a director, a freelance director.
Well, you still are.
Yes, but I mean, for basically 30 years. And there are a number of times that people approach me and said, you should run an opera company, you'd be good at it, blah, blah, blah. And I never felt like that I wanted to tie myself to a place. And then I was working so much in Europe in the 90s and the aughts. And I just one day I said, I want to give back. I feel like I've accomplished a lot artistically, and I want to give back. I want to bring what I have learned and help share it. And I want to have the overview. As a director, you have one kind of overview, but as the general director, you have a bigger overview, for better or for worse, which I'm sure we'll get to. And, honestly, the chairman of the board at that time of Glimmerglass, Betty Eviard, and Sharon Goldman called me, and he was the president, she was the chair, and said, basically, they offered me the job because they had, if I may say, they had released from his contract my predecessor rather quickly. And in that moment, I was like, yes, I'm going to do this now. And I felt like I had actually been preparing in many ways, because for years in all these companies, I would be like, the development department would say, could you come speak at the guild lunch? Could you come, and could you come talk to the marketing department? For so many different companies. And so many different general directors who I really have to credit for having learned from them. David Gockley, John Crosby in France, Ugal, who ran the Paris Opera, Nick Payne, who ran Covent Garden. I watched these people for years, and really, I feel like I learned from them, because they would always say things to me like, oh, you're going to end up having a job like this eventually. And I thought, maybe eventually, and truly it was like the phone call, and my heart was saying, you got to give back. You've got to go to a situation where you can help young people more. And that was really, it was like a synergy all at once.
Has there ever been a moment, understanding that, has there ever been a moment saying, okay, this is what I expected the job to be, and now you're like, oh my gosh, this is way more than I thought it would be? Have you ever sat in the bed at night and you're like, what in the world did I get myself into?
Don't we have that every day, David? I was like this morning, cold sweat, I don't, even before the pandemic, I think we each had that, because you feel the incredible responsibility of, your staff and the artists and, the trustees, everybody. And it's a weight. It's a weight on your shoulders, which is very different than when you're a freelance artist, a very different feeling. But of course, the incredible joy of when things go right and all the elements come together, and, that's a high like nothing else.
mean, that's what keeps you going. You sort of, and it's hard right now because you used to go into the theater. I'd go into the theater when things got tough, and just to be rooted in why I was here and what I cared about and what our company cared about and what it represents in the art form, and that's not possible right now. We can go into a studio, but we don't have that kind of connection, and for me, like standing at the back of the Opera House on an opening night, and seeing the house full and that anticipation and that moment of, thousands of people together that don't know each other and are different, but are acting in a sense of community and in relationship to something that's happening on stage, and it's a symbiotic thing. And you're just like, however hard it is, it's all worth it. This is great. This is like the magic. This is why we're blessed to be in these leadership roles.
It's interesting. One of the things I know about a general director, someone put on the screen here, Spate Jenkins, of course, at Seattle Opera. Spate Jenkins, for me, and everybody knows, if people don't know, Spate Jenkins for me was so important. One of my greatest supporters and mentors. And I was in the Young Artist program at Seattle Young Artists Seattle Opera, and just so instrumental in the success that I'm having today. So that's a shout out for Spate Jenkins. But the thing that I saw about Spate, and it made me realize this, Spate used to come to every single rehearsal, staging rehearsal. And he would be there all the time. And so I knew that a general director had to be in the theater all the time. It was like you had a lunch date with 3 different patrons, and then you did administrative work all the day. Then you had to be in the theater at night. And so you have to love opera, but this aspect, or the idea of being in the theater all the time, it really means that you have to love this thing like none else, right?
You're there all the time. Any general director will tell you have to be there. I mean, Spate was a little different in that sense. Yes. He was there. I'm not there that much. I don't know about you, David, but and I directed many things that Spate hired me for. And so the first time I had to get used to, he was like sitting behind me in a staging rehearsal. I'm like, whoa, this is like a lot. But of course I came to love him and I adore him. And he came at it from a different place. He was the prestigious critic of the New York Post. And he did a lot of learning on the job. And I think that's the interesting thing is, general directors, many of them come from different places and different backgrounds. And I think Spate, was a very different background than either of us, but he turned out to be a really great general director, and his tenure was vital in the things that Seattle accomplished.
He was a gentleman, like in every sense of the word. And he had he was a generous spirit to so many, myself included. I'm not in the theater. I'm not in rehearsal. Larry, you've performed with us many times. I'm not there as much as Spate. And we have an awesome team, like an unbelievable team on the ground that works everything. But I show up a lot, and the reason is not that I'm needed, but that's the reason I show up. Is because it keeps me connected and I care. And even though I'm not needed, then showing up is that kind of more special for me and for the artists in our employment.
It's interesting.
You have to know what's going on. I'm sorry. You just, it's like a lot of times, like I even think, okay, I'm just going to do a drive-by, so to speak, for 20 minutes and watch a scene. But you have to know what is happening, good and bad. And that is where you smell, like you see an artist is like, oh, they're sitting over there. They don't look too happy. I better call them after rehearsal. It's like a huge extended family, and you got to be on top of it.
Yeah. And, when you just mentioned Spate, another thing about Spate was, again, he was someone who really thought about the importance of relationships in the people that was working with him. And I know both of you give so much credence and importance to the teams that you are working beside. And I remember Spate was talking about Kathy McGarrett, who was like the financial person, his yin to the yang, and how important she was. And I absolutely adored her. I adored her. But he talked about how important it was to have people in those positions that did their jobs well, because if they did their jobs well, it helped you do your job even better. Do you agree with that?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
It's a team. It's a team. I mean, you're, whatever the titles are, the director of development, director of marketing, executive director, director of finance, director of production, technical director, you're a family. And I mean, like at Glimmerglass, we have one additional thing is we own all our buildings. So like a facilities manager, and, they're just, you have to be connected to everybody all the time. And so, of course, in the time of the pandemic, it's weird. We don't touch, but we see each other so much more because we're on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Larry, we have the pleasure of you being an artistic advisor for Opera Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to work with all of our teams. So you know firsthand David Levy and Sarah Williams and Rachel in the artistic, Corrado and Rachel in development, and Frank, the guru of marketing and communications. All those people, and they all run their areas. And have agency to do so and work with people, and we wouldn't be able to do the things we do without them, and without you. And so, you want to make sure you have people working that are smarter than you, and let them do their job.
David said something I think is so important. He said, giving people the agency to do their jobs. And I think it's so important in leadership to, hire the right people, make sure that you communicate, and then let them do their job. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it's so important to create that atmosphere. And then those people flourish. The same way you want artists to do the best that they can be. It's like when you make a cast, you think, okay, that person is going to lift up these people over here a little bit. And so you want that in your staff as well. You want to try and figure out ways to do that.
You said something that I find very interesting. You said when everything works well, you said you're in the theater for the good or the bad. And so like opera singing, I think that a lot of people think that it's all glamour, but as a general director, there are probably some bad moments that you have to put out fires. You have to deal with some internal situations. You have to address issues that sometimes or oftentimes are very uncomfortable. And so doing that and the difficulties in addressing those issues, do you feel like you both were people who were built for that? Because it's confrontation, or it can be having to address something. And I don't want to make this a difficult question, but when those difficult moments arise, you have to have, if you want to call it, the intestinal fortitude to be able to address those things and to try to nip it at the bud and to take care of them as best as possible. So how do you approach those moments when it's just like, this is a really, really tough thing to do? Kind of like breaking up with an ex. You're like, I know I need to break up with them. It's hard. I should have done it 2 years ago, but now I have to do it. How do you do it, Francesca?
It's very, very difficult. And I'm sure David is the same way. Conflict is an incredibly hard part of our job, and resolving conflict. But you need conflict to have success. Mm-hmm. You cannot just poo-poo it and put it away. If there is a problem, you have to deal with it, and the buck stops with you. And it often is, very intense interpersonal relationships, because opera, theater, it's all about the people.
Mm-hmm.
The music is our guide, but it's the people that we keep hearing La Boheme because it's you want to hear a new me, and so it's the same thing. When you've got a conflict, whether it's, firing an artist, of course that's difficult, but also, when it's a staff issue, because you're together all year round, when it's an issue with a trustee or a donor, these are they really take a lot of conflict resolution. And I definitely feel I got better at it as I grew older. And even as a director, I felt I used to, I was like a jerk sometimes in my 30s. I realized it. And, because you have to be able to absolutely listen to people and take the wheat from the chaff and figure out how to get over the conflict. And so, of course, in these jobs, I know, David, we face it's not all rosy, but like I said, if you don't have those moments, you're not going to have the great moments afterwards. And there is conflict in this. I think opera has the most amount of variety of temperaments possible, from donors, subscribers, artists, staff, children, extras, dancers, chorus, orchestra, maestros.
We're emotional types too, and that is a huge element when you think about some of, forgive me for saying this, some of your colleagues as stage directors and some of the divos and the divas, the tempers can hit the roof at any time, and that makes any situation a firestorm. And so having to deal with them, getting beyond the emotion, which sometimes has to subside greatly before you can even communicate with them, this has to be a very difficult task to address. David?
I think for me, there's like two categories of sort of difficult things to do. One is the task. So, you have a task that's difficult, like you have to release somebody from employment or a contract or something, or you have staff members that have to do that. And so, I think with that, my approach has just been to be honest, kind, and do it with a certain amount of grace.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other kind of challenges that are more like dealing with a family, and because these institutions are family, so there's the dynamics that are in a family.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an area that I've personally had to grow into. I'm a Canadian, and so we like to be nice and we like everyone to get along. And I've really had to, it's been a growth area to create an environment for different opinions to happen and frank dialogue to happen, and to come up with an action. And maybe not everybody agrees with it, but everyone can stand behind it. And that's a very nuanced leadership requirement to the job, because as I said earlier, we're 501c3s. Everybody owns the opera company.
Mm-hmm.
I don't own the opera company.
Okay.
You as the singer don't. Everybody who touches it owns it, because it's a not-for-profit. So how do you create an environment where you have those conversations? And I've learned this, this, Larry, through our equity and inclusion work, about having interrogative conversations that can be difficult, but they're honest. And so that's a whole kind of special skill that I didn't think I was going to need. Did we lose Jessica?
I think we
say
did.
something wrong?
She left. She didn't like either one of us, so she said, "I'm getting out of here." No, we hope Cheska will call back in, and I just texted her. I was hopefully she'll call back in, because of course I want to have her absolutely, and so we'll continue going until I texted her. She said, power outage coming where she is. So I hope she can join us back. If not, you're in good hands with David and myself too, but hopefully.
Start talking, Larry.
Oh my gosh. But
anyway. She's
okay.
Okay. It's a power situation.
She's okay. She seems to be okay. Let's talk on this subject of, you said the equity and inclusion. That's something. Oh, we're getting Francesca back.
Yay.
Okay. There she is. There. That's okay. I'm happy to have you back. Really happy to have you back.
I said the word maestro, and then the internet and the electricity went flickered. Something is happening on Capitol Hill. Clearly, am I?
That's
Can you see me okay?
Yes, we can see you. And then I'm going to bring you. There you go. See how technology works? And so
Yeah.
there you
I
go.
swear to you, I said maestro and it was like a bolt came from above.
It's going to happen again if you keep saying it. No.
Switch your
You
words.
know, we were gonna, of course, we were gonna tackle the elephant in the room. David mentioned equity, the work they're doing in equity and inclusion. And so that is the conversation that we're having in many areas of society right now. We're talking about it. Of course, it was a big subject in the most recent election. It's been the focus of this administration. They're talking about having a diverse kind of like swath of people that is representative of the people in this country. And so opera companies are also having this very, very, very important conversation. Do you want to talk, both of you, about the work that you're both doing in your respective companies in the areas of equity, inclusion, and diversity?
Oh,
We lost her again. Would you go?
Here.
Yeah. Would you go before she comes back in? I hope she's coming back.
Yeah, I do, but I'll definitely go. Yeah, well, and I get the joys of working with you on it, Larry. So we have established a equity and inclusion committee that is made up of every band of employee and board. It's racially diverse, authority diverse, and gender diverse. And it is really the place where we interrogate what we are doing to ensure that we are being an anti-racist organization. And we meet every Thursday. Oh, hey.
There she is.
Sorry. There is something wrong. There is something wrong in Washington. That was not
Truer words have never been said.
Right. I need to stop saying Washington and maestro. Boom. David was talking about David was talking about
the entrance, right?
Right, there you go. Well, David was talking about, we've gotten onto the subject about equity, inclusion, and diversity, which of course is a very, very important subject right now. David, would you continue?
Sorry.
Yeah, so this group, Jessica just explained, we have a diverse authority, gender, race, staff and board committee. That's the Equity and Inclusion Committee. We don't use the term diversity, and I can talk about that specifically in a minute. We meet every Thursday from 1 o'clock to 1 to 2:30. No, sorry. Yeah, 2 to 3:30. Sorry. And we have established goals for this year. And the first one that we're really tackling is an audit, an equity audit in the organization. We've hired a firm to help us do that, to baseline and to find out a baselining on implicit bias and culture. And we really made a choice. It was really through our staff of color that really, drove home that the idea that they didn't want us to be performative. This wasn't about us making statements or being public, that before we started talking in public, that we needed to do the work individually and internally. And I think that's been one of the greatest gifts of aligning in the pandemic, is that it's given us the time and the space to interrogate who we are individually and who we are collectively as a company as it relates to who has access and equity and inclusion. And that's a snapshot. And Larry, you've been able to join us on some of those, so it's been great.
Yes, I have. Francesca, would you talk?
Yeah, absolutely. I might just try and switch internet
devices.
Just give me a second.
Right. If we. That may be. I think you're calling on a different device. How about that?
Yeah, is that okay?
Okay, that's fine. I'm gonna try to, and let me see if I can get you off here, and then add you there. There
Great.
You are.
Thank you. Now okay. I'm back where I was before. Okay, it's what I'd rather. It's okay. I won't say the W or the M word. Okay. Yeah, I think I think that one of my big commitments when you asked about being a general director, one of the things that I thought when I took the job was like, how can I make everything that I see in the company that I run look like the world? Because, of course, there's also, sexism is a big issue, but we're also very much focused right now, I think, on BLM and Black culture matters. And so that was important to me over the last decade in both companies. And I think we demonstrated that through programming, but more so in a way through casting, and didn't do as well in staff hiring. And so the last year, actually 2019, we formed a task force at Glimmerglass, very much like David was talking about, trustees, staff, artists, and this task force has led to us to hiring an officer who is she basically is we won't say the D word, diversity, I can see that, but she is our EDI officer. And that has really helped us formulate all of our actions, which they're all on our website, and I feel like we have stated them and we are doing them. And it's a very similar thing. We meet actually twice a month, and we're in a rather large and really well-run program run by something called World Trust, who have been doing training it's a 6-month training program for our entire staff. And then we will be offering it to our seasonal staff as well as affinity groups. And so we have made a huge commitment, and we've also been fortunate to get funding to help do this. And I think that's a lot of companies' problems, is getting the right help to help you engage in dialogue in a constructive way. It's not just like, oh, let's do this, let's hire this or that, let's program that. Those are not the solutions. The solutions, are the same thing that obviously that everyone is saying, racism is systemic. And so we have to go back and change the system. And so we're trying to do it in our own small way in our little company. Mm-hmm. And it's not just about the company, it's about everybody who goes through the doors. And this is a commitment that we've made, and we're acting upon it. And actions don't happen overnight. I mean, one of the good things about, I think, being in a small company is it's like, we're working with the churches and with, the schools, and it's not just our company, it's who's in our bigger community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Jessica, I think, one of the things with the pandemic is there's been opportunities to make some actions in addition to casting practices. And certainly, I know with both our companies, we've done new work development by Black and Brown composers and creators. But I know with our channel, we were able to really have a wide invitation on voices that haven't had the opportunity through digital commissioning series, composer in residence, and Cycles of My Being, which starred Larry. And I think there's opportunities as we move forward with a more pliable programming model, which I think the pandemic is requiring, is that we can use that as opportunities to make sure that we are inviting in voices into our field that have not been traditionally invited.
You talk about the pandemic. I'm sorry, please, Francesca.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say that, I mean, it's so multi-pronged artistically, because it is, of course, about casting and programming and hiring. And I do think that programming is so key. I mean, in a way, in Washington, with our American Opera Initiative, having we've done 30 20-minute operas and 8 one-hour operas that have brought in so many new voices and composers and librettists. And that is, that's key, because you're not like commissioning an entire evening. That's one of the big things. It's like, you can't run a marathon if you didn't run the 50-yard dash, and so it's really so much about building up, and in a way that also allows people the creative freedom, but also mentorship. It's like, we can all say, oh, let's do this, let's do that. You can't do that without good mentors, without people helping people. So I I know we both commissioned so many works over the time, and some are clunkers and some are great. And sometimes the people go on to bigger things, but I think that's the really great thing about, I think, both of our companies. I have, great esteem for Opera Philadelphia and all they're doing. And I think that, I know David and I both love new work so much, and we probably would program them all the time if we could, but we can't.
I think we're both pushed or leading the curve.
Yeah.
Right.
You mentioned the pandemic. The pandemic has allowed us it's given us an opportunity to kind of sit and see things in a way that's been different than before. At the beginning of this past summer, I led a book club on racism, where we read 3 books, and we talked about we read a book called White Fragility, we read a book called White Rage, then we read a book called Tears. Gosh, it was by Michael Eric Dyson. So a sermon to white America. So we talked, and there are a lot of people who were in this discussion. It was predominantly Caucasian people, white people, that was a part of these book clubs, which were very well attended and followed. And Anya Chinwa, who's here, he was a part of it. But there were a lot of wow moments in your positions at general directors for the work you've been doing. And I thank both of you publicly, and I think you all know this. Both of you have given me opportunities, and you have a long standing record of colorblind casting, and so many of my colleagues have sung on your stages and have been a part of different works. And I know both of you are leading the charge in that respect. I appreciate that. But even with that and the work you're doing and what you're trying to do, has there been those wow moments? We need to do more. Oh my gosh, I didn't really understand. Because many of the people in the book club also said, I didn't realize just how, I knew it, but I'm realizing just how problematic racism in the world, but specifically in our industry. Is that something that you found out because of the pandemic and having to look at all of these social issues?
Go ahead.
I think when you say wow moments, I mean, I have had a number of really amazing wow moments at performances where I have realized something. Again, racism is systemic, and so you have to find a system to change it. It's not just changing the way people think when they have a wow moment. It's changing their systems. And so for me, I find that the programming of certain things, whether it's like Appomattox or Lost in the Stars or Blue, having particularly people come to me and just in all 3 of those pieces, I've had just people sobbing, audience members sobbing and say, I didn't know, I didn't understand, I didn't see. And I'm like, well, then we're doing our job, because it's when you talk about the book club, it's like people, you need to see tangible things or read words or, it's my book club is reading Cast this month. You need to help people have ways of figuring it out. And I think that, of course, David and I are dealing with audiences that have a wide range of opinions, and we must respond to all of those opinions. We can't just say this is the only way. And so I think certainly programming and having those, when you ask about wow moments, those have just been big wow moments. And David and I have never spoken about this, but my wife was ordained this year and is now the pastor, actually, of our church. And Glimmerglass has always had a huge connection to the churches in the region. We have a faith group, and so I have found that has helped so much in creating ways and avenues for people to have dialogues. And because we think of the theater as allowing that, but sometimes religion helps more with that, or it makes people less afraid of accepting change or talking about change.
Actually, Cheska, I remember talking to Faith, and I knew she was about to be ordained. I think was the last time that we talked. And I don't know if our viewers know, but my husband is a minister, is a Unitarian Universalist minister and a hospice chaplain. And so I think my husband jokes that he doesn't want to be a settled minister because he already thinks we have one church in the family already, which he thinks is Opera Philadelphia. Being a general director is like being a settled minister. So we share many things in common, Cheska. And as you know, I've always been a big fan of yours as well. I think for me, what Cheska said was actually what you're doing programming, and I think we've shared commitment to works by Black and Brown creators. I think for me, the aha moment was again through the equity and inclusion work. And the realization that all of our decision making about those projects and doing those projects was through a white gaze. And that our institutions are white organizations in their power structures and how they're set up. And how I think we're being called in to inviting people into those power structures, into our boards, into our staffs, who's on the curation team that comes from a different experience. And I think for me, that was, starting with White Fragility and reading a couple of other really good books. Just finished The Feminist Ethic of Risk, which is a fantastic one based on writings of Toni Morrison. And really this idea of the oppressed and how they get to have a voice in what we actually decide to do, in addition to them doing it. And for me, that's been a...
Yeah. And, you talk about like responding to people, or, you said you have to talk to a lot of people. I think you said that, Francesca. And one of the things I think that's different about the general director job now is that you have this thing called social media, where people's opinions are for all to see right away, and navigating that. And you have people that have very strong opinions about programming, about casting, about that soprano, about that production that was terrible. They walk away from it and they put it on Instagram or Facebook or all these other platforms. And so you have that, and the echo chambers are huge. And so it kind of like catches fire, and then it's like you're the talk and you're like, oh my gosh, what just happened? So when you think about the social media aspect of it as well, has that somewhat complicated your job in some way, shape, or form? Because of course that does magnify someone's power to either put good or bad energy into the air. And so how do you deal with that aspect of your jobs as well? Because social media is of course, it's the way we communicate and do so many things today.
For me, my job is a profession. And so I deal with it professionally, and we have a communications department. It's integrated with our marketing department. And there are specialists that manage social media. That's their job. And social media is but one form of media that we need to communicate. And it just has more variables. So I think it's an opportunity, and it's something that we have to professionalize to advance our organizations, because that's our professional responsibility. What I do on my own Facebook page and stuff, whatever. My really cute Valentine's picture got lots of likes. That's all I care about. But for the company, do you know what I mean? As the CEO, my view of social media is that it is an opportunity and a communication device that we have to manage like we manage subscription brochures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, David. It's what we do personally is completely different than what we have a company do. There is It's a woman named Brittany, and that is her job at Glimmerglass.
Mhm.
There is a social media manager for WNO, and that is their job. And like we, of course, we just left 4 years of having the CEO respond in their own account, and neither of us would ever do that. Of course, there are things that we see, where a staff member says, "Did you see this person posted this?" And I'm like, okay, don't respond, or respond if it's appropriate. But, we can't live our lives according to that. We are in the jobs where it is our job to have a point of view and a vision, and to execute on the vision responsibly and financially. And that is like the guiding principle that I think we share, and that's how we work.
I think the
You
social
do need
media.
you do need some thicker skin in social media land, though.
I think you do, David, because social media becomes a megaphone, and it really magnifies opinions sometimes. And I wanted to talk about one. I actually want to talk about one thing. It's social media has been used to either damn someone, damn people, or really pump them up, and so that's for good or for better or for worse, right? And so, when you have, for example, I know right now that there are some conversations going on right now with various groups making, strong statements about like wanting to be invited to the party. The discussion with equity and inclusion and diversity, there are groups who feel like we're not going to ask, we're just going to say what we want to happen. And someone may say that there are demands that are being made. And of course, I'm not disparaging this group at all, but this is very strong language that's coming out, and they want a seat at the table. Of course, because both of you are trying to have more equity and inclusion, how do you deal with groups like this, or individuals who make very strong statements and say, you have to do this, you must do this, or really are not asking for a seat at the table but demanding one? How does that work with you? Because that's something that you have to navigate pretty delicately, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the conflict issue. And of course, right now things are magnified because of the pandemic, because of incredible social unrest, because of financial uncertainty, because of the incredible division of classes, the amazing divide that is happening in our country. And I think, I know when David just said thick skins, yeah, you got to have I always feel like I have a heart of a lion, but I have to have a little crocodile skin to protect me sometime.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course these things happen, but eventually goes back to that thing of like, engage in dialogue, use the art form, or use what we're doing to make a bridge and to talk to people and to say, what can we do? How can we do it? Help us to be better. And then it's up to us to decide how to be better, and what to use, and what to respond to.
David?
Yeah. So I think what you're talking about, Larry, is sort of the act of calling people out. And there's certainly been a history in race relations where an institution or a person can call somebody out, which is a public act. Calling in is a private act. And so I think, there have been times where we have been approached to do a number of things in racial justice and equity and inclusion. And in every case, I think our approach is to listen, to understand, and to find a space that we can agree on for action. And really, as the leader of an organization, and a white leader of a white organization, I feel our role is to do that listening, and for us to ask the question, what can I bring to this conversation? What does this conversation need of me and my organization right now? And to find a space with that attitude, so that you can work with organizations that want to be at a seat at the table, that they have a need. With all that said, we're all traveling at this in different ways and in different times, and our starting points are different. So I do think there needs to be a sensitivity on behalf of white organizations that they need to be doing the work. I'm not saying, Cheska's work and my work rate are at different rates, and that's okay. We're just doing what we can do, one step in front of the other, and we need to commit to that. And then the communities of color that want and need and deserve a seat at the table, we need to have open hearts with that, and find a way for that to happen in a way that serves both parties. It's complicated, but I think you want to try and create circumstances where there's not a calling out is what people feel is necessary.
Mm-hmm. Do both of you feel like you're doing enough?
I think that at Glimmerglass, I think that we are doing as much as we possibly can for an organization our size. Mm-hmm. And we are committed to it, and the entire staff is committed with their heart and their soul. And I have seen change within the staff. Literally, I think when we both said like 7 years ago, it was like social change really started to happen for both of our organizations inside. So I've seen a lot happening since then. Of course, it's accelerated in a different way in the last year under the pandemic. Can we do better? Yes. It's like I always say to a singer, can you do better? Do you think for yourself? You decide. And I think it's the same for an organization. We have to each ask ourselves that question, and each person individually, if they can do better. And as the leaders of the organization, you can push to a certain degree, but you also can't push people someplace. Everybody's got to go at their own speed. And so I think from the bottom of each of our hearts, we want to do better, but we are pulling big organizations. And I mean, we're not even that big when I think about it, when I compare myself to a lot of other organizations. But again, I think our spirit and our soul is honest, and we want to learn and be better.
David?
Yeah, my husband and I were actually talking about this morning. He's been involved in social justice work for well over a decade. And, he was like, hey, David, stop. David doubled him. Reverend says to David Divan, David, don't be focused on the final outcome. This work is about a process, a commitment to process. And you need to, and it's generational, and it will take a long time. So focus on the process, remain committed to the process, and find joy in the small steps that you and your colleagues are trying to enact. That's a long way of saying, I don't know, Larry, because it depends on what day you ask me, because each day is a process and a step in that. And some days we're doing more than we can. And on other days, it doesn't feel like that.
Can I pivot really quickly? And, the same thing is true when we talk about equity and diversity and inclusion. Of course, it is largely the discussion about African Americans getting an opportunity. But Francesca, there are very, very, very few female general directors out there. A handful: Afton Battle, Sophie DeLint, you. I'm almost done. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone, so forgive me if I'm forgetting someone. As a general director of a company, that is also a part of the equity and inclusion discussion, would you say?
Absolutely, and there are certainly more now in this country than even when I started. And I mean, in the top bigger companies, of course, Christina Scheffelman is new to Seattle this year, but there are many more women in leadership positions in smaller companies, which is often a place where they can accelerate. I mean, Annie Burge, who was David's wonderful director of development now, but there is no question, like, I've been doing this for a long time. And when I started as a director, I have been through a lot of things. I have been through, I'm not putting, you're in an office where everyone is a man in this office. We're not putting the toilet seat down. I've been through everything. And I'm sure that, you have as well. Somebody just put up Ashley Magnus, who's
Patty
doing
Beggs.
a great job. Patty Beggs, who just retired. Yes. But this is, I'm talking about like in the last decade, it's really, there are more women, but it has been a hard road very often, like back in the beginning. And now there's so many more women stage directors and conductors, the people who decide what it is that you're seeing and hearing, and then they go write about it on social media. But for so long, it was white men. And then I felt, when I got going, like, well, why wouldn't you want to hear a woman's perspective on Salome, La Traviata, Electra, Brunhilde, Leonora? Not that it may be necessarily different that it's a woman, but there's some kind of energy. So of course, I've been through it, and I'm really excited that I see more women in leadership positions as the general director, as the director, stage director, or as a conductor.
Mm-hmm. They're not
and
so many...
I personally, back to my, like, why did you want that job? It was also that, in the sense of, like, I wanted to put women in those positions. And I'm proud that in both companies, with most seasons, we've had a 50-50 ratio of directors and conductors being female to male. These jobs, it's our job to put people in those places. And I know David is doing it. And when I see my colleagues who don't do it, when I open a program and a season announcement, and I go like, ugh, and I have those moments.
I wanted to ask this question very quickly. I wanted to talk about the boards and the guilds really quickly, because we're almost out of time. It's like 8:20 already. And so this is probably one of the difficult parts sometimes. It's one of the joys, I'm sure. These are people oftentimes who are passionate about opera, and they put their resources, they're philanthropic and they want to support the company, and it's a legacy. Their parents did it and they love the opera company, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily come with all positives, and it can be sometimes a little bit tricky to navigate some of those relationships. What is your best advice for someone who's listening today who wants to be a general director at some point? Would you say to them, watch out for the board? Or how would you advise them in leading those conversations with those people who are absolutely crucial to our existence in this art form? Dealing with them is really, really important. David, why don't you start there? Would you?
Yeah, I think our jobs as the professional leaders of the organization is to ensure and breed an affirmative relationship between the board and the senior staff. That I chose that word affirmative intentionally, because we're not going to always agree. There will be difference of opinions, but that we have to hold each other up, and to not see the board as the enemy, but see the board as a partner, and a partner that is bringing a different skill set than you have. And I think when those relationships are not affirmative, that there's often a us and them attitude on both one of parties. I'm not saying just the general director, just and so I think that's the key, and you have to just be realistic that you're the professional leader of the organization, but you have 26 bosses, or however many people are on your board, and you have to treat it like that. And I've seen just the amazing generosity with board members, and they're a board. They don't have to be a board member. They're choosing to serve. They're choosing their philanthropy. Boards collectively underwrite a big chunk of the organization. I see you need to approach it as partners in an act of affirmation.
I think that's a great word, and I do think you have to remember the board hires us, the general director or whatever, the CEO. You are the person who you respond to them. They are your boss, but they chose you because you are the professional. So it's a relationship that should be like the government. It should be something with checks and balances, that has an equal investment in everything. And I remember going back to Artist Koenig, where we started tonight, she once said that the budget that the board approves is your contract between the staff and the board. And once they've approved that, it is our job to enact it. And I've always sort of thought that's a pretty succinct way of doing it.
That's great.
David didn't mention about guilds, but guilds are different than the board because usually boards and guilds are all volunteers and service members, but boards, of course, are often incredibly generous and represent a large portion, really a big tranche of your fundraising often. And guilds often are there as much more service and support. Volunteer support, whether, at Glimmerglass, they're ushers and provide a lot of food, a lot of meals and things, and they're invaluable for that. And they are, in a way, your most diehard supporters often. Again, you can't have a company without a guild. A guild is very important to you need to nurture that service division. And I think that is something that is so important to them and to us, because they do often pick up a lot of things that in a not-for-profit company, you don't have a paid person who may be doing, a secretarial or something that may not be the most stimulating part of a job. So again, they run the gambit, boards and guilds, but they are very important to our organizations.
Here's a question as we're getting ready to tie this thing up. Has being a general director helped perfect the art of the ask? A lot of times you spend a lot of time asking. It is probably one of the biggest parts of the job is asking. And even if some people have been committed for years and years and years, you have to continue to ask them to support your company. Would you speak on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Well, I do a lot of asking. But we have a great development team who is amazing as well. But I think more time I spend in this job, the more I realize that it's really about developing trust and developing relationships. And pretty much any sort of major gift, like $1 million plus gift, sort of came about by the donor asking how they could help. And that's the sweet spot, because you want the philanthropy to be that kind of investment. And it's our jobs to cultivate an interest and trust to get to that point.
The most important word for aspiring general directors or leaders is really, you need to cultivate the relationship, and it has to be personal. People give to an organization, but they also give to us as personalities or as leaders or as people. We both have very strong points of views or visions about the companies that we are allowed to be running. And people support that vision. And if they don't like it, then they're going to go get their money somewhere else. I mean, and that's just the way it is. But, it is that whole thing of cultivating the relationship and having the personal connection. Personal connection, nothing is as important as that with any donor or foundation. It's got to be personal, because that's what people give to. People give to people, for the arts. Of course they give to a hospital because they know that that's right, or their church or whatever. But for the arts, it is definitely about the people, the personalities, the art form, all kind of coming together. And I think that that's the most important lesson, is you have to learn, of course there's pragmatic things, like you have to learn how to have a conversation with a stone or sometimes, but there are also many donors. You have to remember they love what you love. So let's share the love about it.
Yes.
The biggest skill you need is to figure out how you're going to eat your dinner quickly and elegantly, so you have enough time to conduct business.
Without just coming right out of the gate and saying, please, right, would you give me,
you have to, and you don't want to be rude and not eat the meal. So I can eat a meal in an entire meal I can eat in 2 minutes if I have to.
Without looking like you're scarfing it down, just
exactly. It's just an elegant thing.
Okay, here's the last question.
Back when we used to actually meet people for dinner.
Exactly.
Having Zoom cocktails is not as satisfying.
It's not.
Well, here's the parting question. As we, hopefully, crossing fingers, as we get back into the thing we love, getting back into the theater, what do you hope that the industry has taught us, or that COVID has taught us, that you want to make sure that when we're back into the functioning of the companies, that we can really be better off? You as general directors be better off from the lessons you've learned through COVID and getting back to the thing you love doing. What is that thing? If that's an easy question to answer, I don't know if it is.
It's a hard question to answer.
It's hard.
But we're who we are, so we'll answer. Go ahead, Jessica. You go first.
No, I just I think of course it's going to be different. It is not ever going to be what it was, at least in our lifetimes or in my service as a leader of a company. It may be in the next generation, but it is going to definitely be about, in part, reinventing the art form or finding new ways to express it, and taking what we knew from before and finding the best parts of it. And I do think that all of us want to have live back in some way, because we're firm believers in the live experience, which is about community. It's about being in the temple, the church together, the theater together. And then what are the new ways that we're going to create the companies, create the people who lead them, who run them, who sit in the audience, and what we do. It's all of those things.
Yes, David.
We can talk about this for hours.
I'm sure.
I love the comment that just came up on the screen, that Larry Brownlee for general director.
No way.
Yeah. So
go, David.
I got a job for you.
I have so much respect for all of you that I would never dumb down that position by ever trying to be one general director.
Don't say such silly things.
Don't say.
Yeah, I mean, Cheska's right. We're going to re-engineer for the future. We need to figure out how to be positioned in a post-pandemic world. We too can't wait to get back to theaters. We use a few. We do foresee digital being a part of our new existence in a thoughtful way, and wiring that together. But I think the other thing that I hope we keep, I don't know whether this is true or not, but it's my joke about not going out for dinner. Like there's been time, even though we're working out of our homes and it seems like it never goes away. That's on one hand, but on the other hand, in our lives, the running has stopped. And I think that's given us time, even though it seems endless. We work so hard on Zoom every day. But I think there's time for thought, like on a simmer burner with things, because we're running less as a society. And I want people to leave the house and come to the opera house. I got that part down. But I do think that we're going to be more selective. I think people are going to go out less, and we got to be prepared for that. And for us as running institutions, are we going to take that thoughtfulness and that reflection, and are we going to absorb it into our culture of our institution so we can be thoughtful in everything we do? Because, Cheska, 10 years ago, we could go, oh, Opera X goes here. You didn't have to think about it. It just like that would have, all that's gone. And so let's just, be more thoughtful, and maybe hang on to that and stay home and cook meals with our families a little bit more. Maybe that'll make us better at the opera. Who knows?
Wow. Love that. Both of you, my gosh, I really thank you for your generosity. Thank you for coming to join me for this discussion on your important and absolutely crucial jobs to our great art form that we love, my livelihood, my passion. I'm sure your passions as well. And I think my audience, which I've gotten many hearts and likes from people all over saying that they really enjoyed this series, the session tonight. So I thank you both from the bottom of my heart. Of course, you both know I want to work with you. I'm working with you, David. It's my role. And Cheska, we have talked about things, and I'm supposed to come. I'm coming soon to Washington and everything else.
Don't say anything. We're going to announce that very soon.
I didn't say anything. I didn't say that. But I wanted to publicly thank both of you, because both of you have been very important for my career and many of my colleagues.
Well,
and
Larry,
you are doing the work that you're doing, the
Larry.
thing that many of us want to see done, but you're actually putting it into practice and not just talking about it. So both of you, thank you both from the bottom of my heart for being here and what you do.
And we're not signing off without saying that you, Larry Brownlee, are a treasure. You're a joy. You're one of the best people in the business. And I think, I know I am, and Cheska could chime in and say how lucky we both feel to have you work with us and companies. And in this pandemic, you have become a creative as well as a performing artist. And it's just been a joy to watch.
I second all of that, and I'm so happy to have spent time with you, Larry. And Larry, thank you also for giving me the time to hang out with David, who we normally see each other on these Zoom meetings with 30 other people and having some one-on-one, which we used to get, and now. So thank you. And Larry, you are an incredible energy, and your joie de vivre is just, it's infectious. And we want to hear you singing. We want to play tennis and all those good things together.
You mentioned tennis, and people have been putting in the chat what happened to my finger. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't want to ask.
So what happened to my finger? I was playing tennis with a friend of mine, my friend named Luke, and he hits a ball that's going out, and it has top spin on it. So I just think I'm going to catch it. It hit the top of my finger and snapped the tendon. So I have to wear this little baby for 6 weeks. Normally, Kevin Miller, obviously. Who,
oh my God, he's been my doubles partner.
Yeah, who seldom wears shirts, okay? But it's one of these things like, yeah, Kevin, he doesn't own, like, he owns like a shirt. But anyway, no, the thing with Kevin, who hits this like, it's the top spin was half of what Kevin hit. So when this guy hit me on my finger, it like snapped the tendon. I probably would have lost the finger if I had been playing with Kevin Miller. So, but this is what happened. I'm okay. I'll be having this on for the next 6 weeks. It is a splint that I have to take care of and don't get wet. And I have tried to put, like gloves on when I'm washing dishes and stuff like that. Yes, I wash dishes as well. I chip in when I'm at home. But so my finger's okay. It's just a little bit of a nuisance that I have to wear this splint for 6 weeks because I was trying to deal with top spin, not as heavy as Kevin Miller. So anyway, both of you, my love to both of you, of course, to David and to Faith and to Jackson and everyone. I appreciate, again, you coming to be with me tonight on this new series. And it's been very informative and a lot of fun for me. So thank you both again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And for all of my listeners that are here, Kevin is here. Oh my gosh, Kevin Miller. We were just speaking about you. I hope you know that. Laquita Mitchell is in the house. So many people: Jim Lieberthal, Leon Brown, Lee Ellen, Aaron Ehrenstein, Celia Davis, Justina Lee, Nate Snyder. There's so many people. Matete Sil Makobi. Oh my gosh, so many people. John Rivard. Many Ketterson, Mark. I can't name you all, but charge it to my head and not my heart. Thank you all for being here. Next week, we're going to talk about social media and PR experts. And so from the standpoint of being a young artist, approaching this business and using social media as a positive, because I believe that there are ways to use it that are not as smart as well. So we'll be joined next week, and we have some interesting and very informative sessions that will be coming up. So I hope you will tune in again to the Sit Down with LB for another session in the series Inside the Industry. Have a wonderful night, and we will see you soon.